All right, well, welcome to our first Practical Tips for Authors, a series designed to help you, the author, publisher, editor, or illustrator better understand the complete process of what should happen after you finish your manuscript. In future sessions, we will cover book marketing, getting your book business in order, cover design and formatting, legal issues for authors, social media, networking and organization, and many more. So register as soon as you see the flyer mid-month. You can register for each individual month by using practical tips in the subject line. If you're not a member, please check out our website to see the benefits of becoming one. We hope you will join us. Now, a short announcement regarding our annual book awards. Submissions are being accepted until April 30th, so you still have plenty of time. Again, go to the website for info on that or watch for the newsletter, which has a link to that every month. Now, a little housekeeping. I hope you have some questions, that you brought some questions. If you think of one during the presentation, please use the chat feature and type it in there, and I will get it to it during the question and answer period. If you haven't done this already, go ahead to the upper right corner of your screen and click on that speaker view for optimum enjoyment of our speakers. Up first, we have Jane R. Wood, who is the author of 5 award-winning juvenile fiction books where she weaves history and science into stories filled with mystery, adventure, and humor for the young readers, ages 8 to 14. She's also written a nonfiction book for authors called Schools, a Niche Market for Authors. Jane is a former teacher, newspaper reporter, and television producer who often presents on webinars, at book festivals, conferences for writers, and publishers and education conferences. She's a past president of the Florida Authors and Publishers Association. Her website is www.janewoodbooks.com. Jane, welcome and thank you for being a part of this year of the first of many webinars.
Well, thank you, Pat. Oh dear. Oh, there I am. I guess everybody's seeing the same thing.
Yeah.
I will begin. And we already had the question about self-publishing, and that's what I'm going to be talking about this evening. I started self-publishing in 2007. That's a long time ago. And when I first started, it was not as easy as it is today. It was very difficult to find information. Self-publishing wasn't very highly thought of in the publishing industry. So I had to learn a lot of things the hard way. And hopefully I'm going to share some insights with you that will make it a little easier for you to make a decision if in fact you want to self-publish. And then I know Ginger's going to talk in a few minutes about going a different route. But I'm going to talk about 3 basic things tonight. Number 1 deals with money. Everybody wants to know about that. One's going to deal with the different skills you would need if you're going to self-publish. And the third is about the decisions that you're going to need to make if you decide to self-publish. First off, you need to understand that you're going to be running a small business. If you've never run a business before, there's a learning curve there. And if you've done some businesses in the past, there'll be a lot of similarities, but this one will also have some specific details that you'll need to learn. First off, you need to form a company. And that means deciding whether you're going to be a sole proprietor or an LCC or a corporation or any of those entities. You would register with the state, and most of the webinars and the experts that I listen to strongly suggest that you don't make your company your name. So my company name is not Jane R. Wood. My company name is Florida Kids Press. I write kids books. I live in Florida. I came up with that name in 2007. But they say there's complications if you ever decide to combine your company in with somebody else or go with a publisher and sell it. It's still got your real name on it if you've made your company your real name. These are all decisions you might want to discuss with an attorney because you do have to have a company name. You definitely want to create a separate bank account for your book business. You don't want to commingle it with your personal funds. And of course, one of the first things you should do is create a budget. There will be expenses involved when you self-publish. If you hire any professionals to help you, get your book printed and published and distributed and marketed, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes, there's going to be expenses involved. There's going to be printing costs. So sit down and come up with a realistic budget, something that you can afford, but be realistic going in. It's not going to be free. You're going to have to make an investment in yourself and in your company. You also want to consider the income tax implications, which can be very good. I write off a lot of my expenses every year. About this time of year, I was just preparing our taxes the other night to send it to my accountant. And I keep very meticulous records on all of my expenses so that I can write them off legally every year. I actually do mine very basically. I have a Excel sheet. I'm not good at numbers, but I have a son with an MBA, so he set up an Excel sheet for me as he calls it. It's Jane friendly. But I list such expenses as my printing costs, postage, travel, meals, office supplies, conference fees, vendor fees, sales tax, which I have to pay quarterly, and any of my professional fees like paying to my webmaster. So keep track of all of your expenses, and then I would strongly suggest you use an accountant to help you determine which ones are deductible. And in some cases, it's just a percentage of certain categories. And I would not be good at that. So I pay somebody to do that for me. Another consideration is you're going to have to register with the Department of Revenue for the state of Florida. If you're in Florida, if you're in another state, you're going to have to register there if they charge sales tax. And as you know, we do in Florida. And so you've got to pay the governor his share. And that's just a little process that you need to learn, but you also need to be able to track all your sales. Some of your sales don't involve sales tax. If it's going to a bookstore or through the distributor or to a nonprofit, in my case, to a school, I don't have to pay sales tax on those. But any books I sell directly to students, or if I'm at a festival or somewhere where I'm selling at a vendor table, then I have to keep track of those sales so that I pay the governor his share. And then you want to maintain good record keeping. And I am very familiar with Excel, and so that's an easy program for me to use. I keep track of my sales. I keep track of my expenses, as I just showed you. I keep track of my inventory. I have 6 different books, and so I need to keep track of how many I have so that if I'm getting low, I can order more, so they'll be here should I get a large order. And I occasionally get fairly large orders from schools, 120 books, sometimes 300 books, and I need to make sure I've got the inventory to be able to provide that. And the other thing is I keep track of my customers, all of my contacts. Maybe it's a librarian, maybe it's a bookstore manager, maybe it's a school, a teacher at a school. I want to keep track of those people because you'd be surprised how many times you need to go back for that information and say, what was the name of that teacher at XYZ school, or the manager at a bookstore that you had a good rapport with? You might not deal with them every day or even every year, but if you've got it listed somewhere where you can get your fingers on it, it can be very productive for you in the future. So those are some of the things related to the finances of starting your own business. The second thing I'd like to talk about is outsourcing. What kind of skills do you have and what kind of skills do you not have? There's things that I don't do well, and anything I don't do well, I pay somebody to do it for me. If I don't, it's going to look amateurish. I pay somebody to edit my books. And on editing, I'm a stickler about this, and I think everybody will echo this that's in the book publishing industry. You want to pay a good professional book editor to edit your book. You may want to do one that does a copy edit, maybe a separate one that does content editing. But you want to pay a professional book editor, not your sister-in-law who's an English teacher. Professional book editors know things that other people don't know, and you want it to be professionally published. I go into bookstores all the time and talk with many of the managers there, and they always tell me people come in with their books that they've self-published, And they said they can open the book up and read just a few pages and determine whether it's been professionally edited. And if it hasn't, they aren't interested in carrying that book. Another thing you may want to pay someone for is illustrations or photographs. If you do photographs, you're going to have to pay for them. But if those are in your book, then you're going to want to make it look good. A book format. You want to pay somebody to format, or a book designer. I would not be good at that. I know there's software out there that you can do that, but if you don't understand about margins and fonts and headers and spines and all of those things, you're not going to get it right. And again, it's not going to look professional. Same thing with a cover designer. It's very easy to spot a cover that has not been professionally designed, and you want yours to look good. So I strongly suggest considering getting a book, somebody to design the book cover for you. Same thing with the graphic designer to do any of your marketing materials, any ads, any flyers that you're going to be printing. A webmaster, it's a must to have a website, even if it's a basic 3-page website, a home page, a book page that would also be a shop page, as well as describing your books, and then maybe a page about you, the author. And some of you could probably design one. I couldn't. I would just suggest that you want to make it look good. You need to think about getting a distributor or a wholesaler, unless you're going to distribute your books completely yourself. I do both. I distribute a lot of my books myself, but I also have them with Ingram. I also have them with Baker and Taylor. And of course, I have them on Amazon and other online retailers. And then I'm doing my own distribution to those. There's multiple ways you can do this. You just got to do your homework and figure out what works best for you. And then marketing. I do most of my own marketing, social media, contacting newspapers, TV stations, radios when I'm launching a new book. And if you're not good at that, then you may want to look at hiring somebody to do that for you. The third thing I'll talk about is decisions that you need to make. One of them has to do with your printing, and that has many options today. When I started out, it was literally only offset printing. And today, offset printing doesn't make a lot of sense unless you're going to print at least 1,000 copies. But with print on demand, you can order as many copies as you need. If you only want to order 20, that's a easy investment for most people. I sell lots of books to schools, so I will order 3,000 to 5,000 at a time on any single title. And so I have a lot of books to order, and I usually get a better price when I do offset printing. But those are decisions you need to make. And then, of course, you should consider ebooks. And there's multiple programs out there that you can have your book formatted, or you can go to Kindle, or work with somebody that knows how to format it for an ebook. That's probably the easiest of all three. Printing options, you've got to think about if you're going to do all of it yourself. Color, black and white, hardcover, softcover, trim size. Is your book going to be 5x7, 6x9, 8x10? What color are the pages? Are they white? Are they cream colored? What paper weight? If you're doing a children's picture book, you want pretty substantial paperweight so that the color doesn't bleed through. Those are just different decisions you're going to have to make. Retail price. You definitely want to put your pencil and calculator to determining what your retail price is going to be. The reason I say that is when you give it to a distributor or you sell it on Amazon, you're going to have to give them 55% discount off the retail price. And if you're going to distribute it yourself, so you've got 55% right off the top, and then the postage, and then the materials to mail it. I can tell you about an author friend of mine who asked me to come help her get her book up on Amazon, which I did. And the first book she sold, she got back with me and said, I didn't make any money. I barely broke even. So you have to price it according to be able to take into all of that account and still make money. But you don't want to overprice your book because that won't sell either. So you need to really understand what's a good market price for your book where you can still make some money. Fulfillment, I just mentioned I do a lot of my own fulfillment. That means I'm running to the post office at least once a week. And then I also have Amazon and Ingram and Baker and Taylor, and they will distribute it for me, but I'm still having to ship out books when I do everything myself. And there's costs involved with that, both time and money. You need to develop a marketing plan and a marketing budget. It's not just the printing costs and the other costs that I mentioned, the professional fees. It costs to do some marketing. You can do a lot of free marketing, but there are other things you may want to purchase. And again, you may want to have somebody help you with that. Can you do your own social media? Do you know how to do that? You can learn. We all go through it. You can learn. The last thing I'll mention is how valuable it is for networking. Joining organizations like FAPA, because everybody that's in that organization is dealing with the same issues that you're dealing with. Maybe they're in different genres. I was just suggesting to someone to come to our conference in July because you're going to learn something from the speakers who are talking about all these publishing issues, but you might learn something from the person sitting next to you at lunch. Or if you have a question, you can go to someone and say, can you answer this question for me? And if you came to me and I couldn't answer it, I'd say, oh, well, go ask Sam. He's dealt with that. He knows all about that, or whatever it might be. So the networking is extremely valuable. I have found that authors and publishers are very sharing people in this industry, at least most of them. And you can always find somebody to help you get answers to that. So basically, that's what I would share with you about self-publishing. You want to consider the money aspect. You want to consider the skills that you've got and you don't have, and some of the major decisions that you have to make. Because go into it with your eyes open, knowing that there's going to be those details that you're going to have to deal with. And if you feel like that's not for you, then you want to consider either going with a traditional publisher or a hybrid publisher. And Ginger's going to tell you all about that. So I'll be glad to answer any questions at the end after Ginger's done her part. I hope this was helpful.
Thank you, Jane. Appreciate it. Great job. Well, next up is my own publisher, Ginger Marks, who is an award-winning author and internationally known designer. Her publishing firm, Document Publishing, has been recognized by multiple organizations, including Women in E-Commerce. And in 2020, Ginger was awarded the prestigious FAPA Founders Award for her commitment to the publishing industry. She has written articles for the Huffington Post and is an expert e-zine articles author and offers a monthly e-zine, Words of Wisdom. This offers advice on publishing and publishing-related subjects, which you can register to receive on her website at documentpublishing.com. Thank you, Ginger, for coming on and giving us some insight into some more traditional routes of publishing.
Thank you, Pat, for asking me to join you and to share what knowledge I have gained over the years. And I've got to start with, if what Jane told you scares the bejeebers out of you, then I think that the information I have to share might calm your nerves a little bit, because there are companies that can help you. First off, we have the traditional publishing. I'm going to start there because that's what everybody thinks is the end-all, be-all. The traditional publishing model, if you look at the number of books sold or created every year, there's actually 4 million books, not including ebooks, just print books. 4 million new books every year. The traditional big five only represent almost just a little under 3% of those books. So maybe around 115,000 books is all they publish. So it makes it hard to get, to begin with, a big publisher to even look at you. They do have a wide distribution channel, and they offer done-for-you marketing plans, which can be good or bad depending on what you want to do. You can either use their marketing plan, which then they'll set up and tell you exactly where to go and what you're going to be able to do. And they'll set up your TV shows and all of those things. And if not, if you don't want to do some of those things, you're stuck. If they say you got to go to Good Morning America and it doesn't fit your schedule or you don't feel comfortable doing it, then that's not going to work for you, but you still have to do it. There's a possibility that you could get an advance. There's also literary agents, because they have such a small number of books that authors that they take on every year. You really have to have a literary agent, and the literary agent will then take a portion of your profits as well. So not only are you going to lose that 55% that Jane was talking about, on top of that, you're going to lose money to your literary agent. You also lose all control. You're going to give up all your rights to the publishing company. What you're doing is you're literally giving your book to them and hoping that they'll sell enough to make a profit. And until they make their costs back, like I was saying, there's a possibility you might get an advance. If you do, it's going to be a small portion. And once you have given your book to that publishing house, they have to make their money back before you're going to make any money, including the advance that they've given you. So you could literally give your rights to the publishing company and never make another dime. So you've lost control, you've lost the money. If they want to change the title, they want to change the content, they want to change the cover, anything, they can do that because they now own that book. And it's generally speaking for a 3-year period minimum that they require. And besides that, they have a large employee base. In other words, they have a team of editors, they have a team of designers, they have a team of formatters, they have a legal team. All these people have to get paid. So the cost of publishing a traditional publishing house book is usually will run between $3,000 and $5,000 for them to publish it. And it used to be that the royalty rate that they offered was between 7 and 10%. Since things have changed and they're having more competition because of the self-publishing industry and the subsidy or hybrid press, they have raised those rates. So now that you can get maybe 10 or 15%, the larger your name is, the more books you sell, the larger percentage you're going to get. And another very important factor is that it takes between 2 and 3 years to publish it. So you've got $3,000 to $5,000 to publish it. You've got low royalty rates, and length of time to get it published is 2 to 3 years. So those are the benefits and the pitfalls of going with a traditional publishing house. Those big five, in case you're wondering, are Hachette Book Group, HarperCollins, Simon & Schuster, Penguin Random House. It used to be Macmillan, but they're now out of business. So now they're replaced with McGraw-Hill. And some of you are familiar with McGraw-Hill because they are more of a educational-based publisher. So if you don't want to give your book away and you don't want to have to learn everything that Jane mentioned earlier, your other option is what's known in the industry as hybrid or subsidy publishing. That they're one and the same thing. So you may hear it called one, or you may hear it called the other. In the subsidy publishing industry, you kind of work together with your publisher to make a team, and you do some things, they do some things. The benefits are that you stay more in control, but you don't have to learn everything that Jane said, because they take over all that legal things. They have the responsibility for directing you as to who good vetted people are to use. That's another thing that's important. You have to use a vetted editor. You have to use a vetted designer, formatter. If they're not vetted, what that means is they may be just starting out and calling themselves editor or a designer. You have to make sure that you're using someone that's a professional that knows the industry and that part of it, as Jane had mentioned earlier. They also help share the costs. Usually what happens is you pay to submit your files. You pay for the book formatting, the cover design, and the editing. All else is paid for by your publisher. That means that you're actually responsible for making sure that all the pictures are obtained legally, all the illustrations are obtained legally, that it's been properly formatted, it's been properly edited, and then they take over and handle all the legal aspects. There's very little paperwork for you to have to deal with because your publisher will do a reports. Fortunately, we are able to give you a report every month, starting 3 months after your book actually publishes. And the reason why we don't report until 3 months after the first book sells is because that's how long that the distributor takes to pay us back. If there are returns, then we have to pay those return fees and things. So there is a slight delay in getting paid, but that's a typical in the industry. And the fees that you get, your commission level, is much, much higher. Remember I told you you only make 10 to 15% with the traditional model? With the subsidy hybrid model, you can make between 35 and 50% of the commission. And so your much higher royalty rates are obtained through the subsidy while not having to deal with all those legal issues. Then, as far as marketing goes, every publisher, whether traditional or hybrid subsidy, will also not market your book completely. They'll only get you started. So they may direction you or help you, but an author has to market their own book. An author is responsible for going to book readings, book signings. I can't do that for you. No publisher can do those things for you. Blog tours, all those kinds of things, those are your responsibility to do. But we do help you and give you direction and offer you any advice anytime you need us. We're always there for you. So those are the differences between the traditional and the hybrid. And if you have any other questions, Pat will be here to field your questions if you have written them, and I welcome your questions too. Thank you, Pat. I don't hear you, Pat. I can't hear you, Pat. I see Pat, but I don't hear her. Does anybody else hear her?
Okay,
There we
I
go.
muted myself. Sorry about that. So we're at the Q&A. I just, what I was reading when you couldn't hear me was, for a free booklet on writing, publishing, and marketing your first book, write to publisher at documentpublishing.com. Use free booklet in the subject line. So now we are here at the Q&A. I've gotten a few questions over the chat feature. I would suggest that you would raise your virtual hand. If you don't have one of those virtual hands, raise your real hand. The first couple of questions that we had, let me get back to my chat feature here. The first one was from Bruce Ballister. I've been told that in Florida, that using your name in your company name, you don't have to file with the state. Example, Ballister Books is a valid Florida company name without having to file as a Florida corporation. Is that still the case?
I don't know if you're asking me. I don't know. That would be something you would check with, isn't it the Department of Corporations with the state of Florida that would answer that for you? I seem to remember somebody telling me that before, and I think that's true, but I'm not an expert on that. So you'd probably have to check on that.
I'd suggest you check with a literary attorney. They will know for sure and give you a definitive answer.
Okay, the next one is from Richard Bonte. I hardly make any money selling books. It would cost me a lot to start a company. Also, if I have my website in my name and a company name that is not my name, that is a problem, right?
Yes, that can be a problem. You could either have, if you're talking about social media, you could have two different accounts, one in your name and one in your company name or your book title. For the website, what I would suggest is, how is the easiest way for people to find you? If they're finding you because of your name, they know you, then I'd use that as for your website. People that are looking for my books, they remember my name. They don't even have a clue that my company is called Florida Kids Press. That is just my legal entity. That's where the money comes and goes. But people know me as Jane R. Wood, or as the kids say, that's the book lady, or something like that. So I use Jane R. Wood for my website and in my social media, because that's how people can find me. Right. Maybe Ginger or somebody else on the board has an answer for that.
Well, I have heard it said that if you are only going to write one book, then you should put it in your book's title. If, however, you plan on writing multiple books, then you should put it in your name.
Okay, good answer. Again, from Bruce excuse me, Bruce, sorry about that. Bruce Ballister, as a self-published, do you worry about the availability of your product in the event of your untimely demise?
I guess we all have COVID on the mind.
None of us are very young anymore.
Wait a minute.
Hold on.
On there, buddy.
I think you probably need to have some things put in writing regarding the legal rights of your books. One of the things that Ginger mentioned is when you go with a traditional publisher, they own a lot of those rights. So you just need to have something in writing that your rights and any proceeds that are going to come from future sales when you're no longer here would go to whomever you want it to go to, a member of the family or whatever. I'm in the process right now of starting a separate company because I'm co-authoring a book with another author. And we are definitely setting up a contract and an agreement that spells out what happens if something happens to one of us, because I would definitely want my my husband or my kids to be able to get the proceeds from any future sales. But again, because I self-publish, and your question was for self-publishing, I own those rights. I own everything that goes with it. And it might not be worth a lot of money right now. Hope springs eternal that it's going to make the New York Times bestseller list one of these days, or something like that, and it's going to be worth a lot more.
Right.
And so it's just something you need to put into a contract. You need to put it in writing so that those proceeds would go where you want it to go when you're no longer here.
Well, my question is predicated because you seem to have a pretty respectable volume, and it's not an insignificant amount of money and or income. And should you want to pass on that benefit to heirs, would you then turn that over to, say, a Ginger or somebody else to manage for you?
That would be a decision for my heirs. I would give them the rights and I would give them all the inventory. And because I have 6 books and I print, like I said, 3,000 to 5,000 at a time, I probably have 7,000 or 8,000 books right now in inventory. I let it go down near the spring and summertime because school is out, and there hasn't been a lot of sales this year with COVID, but I'll be ramping up again in July and August for the new school year. And I would have that conversation, and I have had that conversation with some of my family members. They can do with it what they want. I mean, if they want to turn it over, sell it to a publisher and say, here's the inventory, and come up with a fair price and let them take it from there, and even the rights. I would not want them to give away the rights, but they could work out something where that publisher could continue to publish the books because they do sell well. And with the school market, there's always a demand for them. So yes, I have had that conversation with my kids, actually.
Jane, from Richard Bonte, he wants to know if you do your own illustrations.
I don't have illustrations in my books. My books are chapter books. Now the covers are designed by somebody, but I put photographs in there, and all the photographs, let me find one, I've taken myself. There's the oldest house in St. Augustine, because this book takes place in St. Augustine. One time I needed a photo that from my Boston book, because I wasn't going to run up to Boston and take a picture just because I needed it. And I found one that I liked and I paid for it. And I give that credit, as Ginger will tell you, you have to credit that in the printed copy. But I use all my own photographs, so I own them. It's not an issue.
Okay. Ginger, as a writer in his, this is from Bruce again, as a writer in his 70s, are the agents simply more likely to not engage at all, regardless of the quality, simply because of age?
As far as agents go, unless you're reaching out to a traditional publishing house, one of those big 5, I would not even worry about that. It would be a non-issue because you're not going to have that problem with getting your book into a publishing house. Your age doesn't make a difference for another reason too, because it will also go to your heirs. So if you're a self-published author using your own name and not a corporation, then you just put it in the will who it's going to go to. If you have a contract, that information needs to go in the contract.
The reason I had a question was that I just have finished a novel, and I'm talking, well, instead of just throwing it up on KDP, why not send out some query letters? I haven't done that in a few years. Painful.
Yes.
Especially when you get back a rejection in 4 hours.
Yes.
But everybody looks like they just graduated from Brown University 2 days ago. You know, they look like 23-year-old people on these pages full of agents, and you're like, wait a minute, do these people even have any experience with life, much less with literature?
No, there are really well-known authors that didn't even start writing until they were in their older years, and they're traditionally published. So I would say that's probably a non-issue for you.
Okay.
Okay, from
You have to be hard. You have to be hard and ready to get those rejection letters, especially if you're doing it for yourself. You're sending the queries. You do not have a literary agent. A literary agent will find you a company that fits your genre. So you're not applying to companies who don't even want your type of work. So those are, you just have to keep trying if you're going to do it on your own.
I heard J.K. Rowling hit it on number 28.
Yeah, you just keep trying.
Okay. Ginger, this looks like it's going to you too, from Arlene Miller. In hybrid publishing, you say you can make 25 to 50%. How much does the hybrid publisher take? That seems high after the bookstore discount.
Okay, what happens is you're putting your book up for retail. Your distributor is going to take a piece just for distributing your book. Your printer is going to take a piece just for printing the book. Then there's shipping and handling, and then that 53 to 55% that you give to the bookstore or retailer. What's left is the commission. That commission amount is paid to the publisher, and then it's split between you and the publisher. So your percentage is of the commission amount that the publisher is paid by the person the company handling the distribution. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I'm not real sure who this is going to, but it's from Jen. Is there a formula to use to determine an SRP for your book? Anybody want to answer that? Jane? Ginger?
Not quite sure what she means by SRP.
Jen?
Acronyms are not always understood.
Suggested retail price. Suggested retail price.
Oh, okay. Generally speaking, what I do is my distributor printer has a calculator, and I'll go in and use that to plug in different figures and different discounts and things of that to come up with a price. Then I'll go into the different bookstores, Barnes and Noble and Amazon, and look and see what the books in that genre, in that size, by other authors are selling for, so that you don't price yourself out of the market. So that's how you have to really have to crunch the numbers.
Okay, from Arlene Miller again, I have the information about whom I want royalties to go to in my will. Is that the place for it?
I can answer that. Yeah, I have put it in my will. It's all spelled out and should be very seamless when something happens to me. How did we get on this topic?
Oh, that's pretty.
But as I said, you are going to be running a business, and these are business decisions. And you know, this is basically a piece of property. It's intellectual property, but it'd be just like your car or your house or any of your other possessions. So I'm glad to know people are thinking about that, because I thought about it at one point, and yes, it is in my will, and I think that's the best place to put it. Let me mention one other thing. The questions that came up about the agent, the literary agent, we just happened to have a literary agent speaking at our conference in Orlando in July. So if you want to learn about agents, there's going to be someone speaking Friday afternoon who is a literary agent and can answer all your questions.
Okay.
I think I just did a commercial.
I think you did too. From Jen, where can you find the resources for finding agents?
Ooh, good question. Golly gee, I don't use them, so I don't, I can't give you a direction, Jen, sorry. Jane, you got any suggestions?
No, I don't use an agent. I do all my own marketing and distribution. There are some places out there, like I said earlier, networking. What I have learned to do during COVID, because I had more time on my hands, was go to a lot of online webinars and Zoom meetings and sessions and learn these kinds of things. Now, I didn't learn a lot about agents because I'm just not interested, but there's a lot of good seminars and webinars and conferences where you can learn this information. So I suggest you go online and you look for some of those. Another good resource would be IBPA, which stands for Independent Book Publishers. IBPA, Independent Book Publishers Association.
Yep.
And they're out of California. FAPA is an affiliate organization to them. They're like our national group. And they have all kinds of information, all kinds of resources on their website to learn about that.
If I may, there's a bunch of books on Amazon on Guide to Literary Agents, Guide to Publishers, Editors, and Literary Agents. There's a bunch of books out there. There used to be one called LMT that I used to get a long time ago before I was even published. But there's plenty of books out there on that. Yes, Sam?
Yeah, just one caveat there. Just be sure that you check the pub date to make sure the information is current before you invest in that book.
Sam, you'll need to unmute yourself.
Okay, I think, am I unmuted?
You are yes, you are unmuted.
I am unmuted, yeah. I was just going to say that there are a number of books, as Pat just said, about how to find a literary agent, and one of the most popular is Writer's Market, which also gives you a lot of information about publishers. I just put in the chat the link to the Amazon on that. Well, actually, sorry, Pat, it went privately to you. I meant to send it to everybody.
That's okay.
But at that point, but I think I've talked to a lot of authors who have tried to go the agent route, and most of the contacts that have been fruitful have been personal meetings with agents at conferences. So that is no matter where it is. So there's an art and a science to a query letter. The query letter is really, really important, as well as being able to pitch your first chapter or two. But almost everyone that I know that has secured a literary agent within the last, say, 6 years, they have gone to a conference like FAPA's conference, and they have actually connected with a literary agent, because it's not what happens when you have that contact is that even if the literary agent doesn't think it's a right fit for you, they know other agents. And if they're excited about what you have produced, they will actually suggest that you pitch it to another agent. And if they really, really like you, they'll actually let you use their name to get the foot in the door. And that's a huge part of it. So, but by the way, I think it was, I forget who it was, maybe Ginger, literary agents are not fast. And there is a difference between when you're pitching nonfiction versus fiction.
True.
Nonfiction typically will allow you to pitch your book to many literary agents, but fiction, they're a lot stickier about who's seeing it and when you can actually get a response and that type of stuff. So talk to other authors who have literary agents too. Again, you reach them at conferences. So it's it is a process that you have to be dedicated to. Yep.
All right. From Jennifer Jordan, who do you contact to get your schools interested in your books? I have coloring books that would be great for small children.
Well, I can answer that one because that's where I sell probably 80% of my books in schools and to students in schools. You're not going to like the answer. It's basically one school at a time. Of course, I've been doing this now for 16, 17, I don't know how many years. And I have built up a repertoire and a rapport with schools, and I get a lot of repeat visits. But a lot of people think, well, I'll just call the elementary director at a district and tell them about my books, and they'll tell all their schools. It doesn't work like that. Your best way to get into the schools is to know somebody. And if you don't know somebody, go meet somebody. Talk to the media specialist, find a teacher in the age group that your books are designed for, and send them or give them a free preview copy and talk to them and see if you can't set up an author visit, maybe in person when schools are open again, or a virtual author visit, or explain to them what you've got. And hopefully, if you do enough of those, you'll have several of them that will say yes. Once you get your foot in the door, it's amazing because teachers talk to other teachers. Media specialists will talk to other media specialists. And it's just something that's going to take time. With any kind of marketing, it's going to take time. But I sell the bulk of my books to schools and to the students in those schools, because when I do a school visit, not only does the school buy books, but then the kids, mine is a series. So they've read one book in school, and then they want to buy the other 4. So if any of you are interested in writing books for kids, you really want to think about doing a series, because that's where the sales are. And every time I write and release a new book, it pulls the sales of the other 4 books. So marketing to schools is a very unique market. It's very different from going into a bookstore or pitching it anywhere else. Schools are a very unique animal, and there's just certain strategies. And that's what my book, in fact, it's sitting right there, School Niche Market for Authors, is all about, telling you how to get your foot in the door with schools. And yes, it is a very lucrative market.
Yeah, if you're trying to get into schools, I highly, highly, highly recommend Jane's book. I tell all my children authors who want to get in schools, buy her book first, then rewrite your book to include the things she says, and then I'll look at publishing you. But yeah, one way and I think Jane would agree, one way that you can get into schools and figure out who it is, offer your services to go on that career day. Every year they have a career day. Offer yourself to go speak at a career day and tell them what it is to be a writer, or what it is to be a publisher, or whatever you're talking about. That way you get known, they see that you want to help, and you get the names of the people too. So that's one way to get into a school.
Okay, from Richard Bonte, there are 2 million plus authors on Amazon. It's tough when one just does fiction. It seems much easier to write a book, I've written a lot, than to market it and sell it. Any thoughts?
True.
Yeah, well, there are up to right now on Amazon over 6 million books. So you're fighting an uphill battle. And the thing about marketing is, if you don't continue marketing, once you start, you have to keep it up. You can't just reach your pinnacle and then back off, because then your sales will back off too. So you got to keep at it, always putting it forth, always be willing to put $1 in to get $1 out. Jane, do you have anything to add?
No, it's all about exposure and being consistent. When you find areas where you're getting some success, keep nurturing that and expanding it, and then stick your toe in the water and go into some new areas as well. You just got to keep it fresh and keep it out there.
Okay, from Lucy, we have considered doing podcasts interviews to market your book too. I've done several now.
Yes.
I don't know what this means. Jennifer Jordan said, thank you, point of contact. I'm not quite sure what that means. Jennifer, you want to ask it? You'll have to unmute yourself.
Hello?
Hello.
Can I be heard? Yeah. No, it was answered. I appreciate that. I was
Okay.
thinking of volunteering seems like a wonderful idea too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's see, we have Arlene Miller again. My books are mostly sold to colleges and maybe high schools, but don't K through 12 books have to be accepted by the state if they are to be used in the curriculum?
No, no. Some school districts will want to approve it and they'll put it before a committee or a panel. I've had no problems. My books are fiction though. And I've had no problem getting my books into schools ever. Maybe there are some districts that want to approve it. I've never had that problem at all.
Okay. All right, I think we're almost caught up to the questions. Does anybody else have any more?
I do, Pat.
Go ahead.
I wasn't able to access the chat, so is it okay if I just ask the question?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was wondering, have any of you, because there's a lot of permission, if you want to use, I'm so sorry, if anybody, you see a lot of pictures on Facebook that are beautiful. Do you have to get permission when it's a random thing thrown out there, like somebody sends you a picture of something and you could really use that picture for inside your book? Or do you have to always get permission, even though it seems like it's community when you see those pictures all over the place? Are you able to use it in your book, or do you have to go through some kind of permission process?
Okay, the first thing I want to tell you is that if you find it on the internet, it's not necessarily available to put in your book. The second thing is, if it's on the internet, it's at 72 DPI, which is like dots per inch. It's like real little. And if you try to take it up to what's required by a print book, which is 300, imagine taking an inch by inch and blowing it up to 3 inches. It's going to be muddy. It's not going to be clear. You're not going to be able to even sometimes make out what it is. So yes, you need permission regardless of where you get it. And yes and no, do not use any photo you use. Don't go to Google and search an image and just use that. It's not legal.
Bruce, I saw your hand up. What's up?
At the last conference we had, there was a person doing copyright law. I can't remember her name, but she gave out a link that you can, if you find an image you like, you can put that image to that link and it will tell you what the source is. I found an image off the internet of a that I want to use for a new cover design for one of my older books. It's a beautiful image. I finally tracked down the photographer. He was apparently dead because it's just an old website that was still continuing, and he was no longer managing the website. But, you know, 5 efforts later, there was never a response, and I was still uncomfortable with using the picture. So I found another one and a photographer. She now has the credit for the new cover on my book. But there is a link, and I don't know if we can find it in the archive from our 2019 conference, but you can do an internet search for where an image was originally sourced and not, you know, the Facebook repost.
Okay, Bruce, that is tinyeye.com, TINYEE.com. And you can, it'll give you the resource for where it is. The original, you look for the oldest date,
Right.
Sort it by oldest date, and then you can go and purchase it from that company. But as you did perfectly correct, because if you cannot get permission, do not use it.
Might find out he's not really dead.
Heirs, well, you can't get permission from him, but his heirs may have rights to that image. And if you can't get it from them, then don't use it. Don't ever use an image you didn't take yourself that you don't have rights to. Even if you're finding it in the newspaper, you have to go to the newspaper and get the rights from them. And they will then, after you've paid for that image from the newspaper, they'll then send you original image that you can use that's high enough quality to use in your book.
The only X out from that is I used to use pictures from NASA on my covers.
Those
So I
are
write science
governments. Those are
And just give
governments,
them-
and those are
and you
legal.
just give them the attribution for what mission it was taken from or what satellite took it, and they're fine because they're all public. 'Cause
Yeah,
the
they're
taxpayers
public
pay for it.
domain because they're government. These are different. Yes, you can use those.
Arlene Miller also says Pixabay has lots of illustrations that can be used without permission.
What did you say, Pat? Pix?
Pixabay, Pixabay, Pixabay.
Just make sure that they're high enough quality.
And so and Jen says, so does Unsplash.
Yeah, there are several. I have a spreadsheet of different companies that offer that you can find. If you're interested, send me a quick email. By the way, my publishing house has an A in the Ment, so it's DOCUMEANT, publishing.com. So just send it to publisher at Diamond Publish, and then in the subject line, put image spreadsheet, and I'll be happy to share that with you.
Richard Bonte says, what about Shutterstock on the internet? I found a number of pictures that are free to use as well as paid pictures available. So how about Shutterstock?
Okay.
Check your licenses. Each image has a license agreement. Check the image license agreement. If it says it's free to use, and sometimes with images through stock houses, they have a limit to the number of impressions you can use. Say it's 1,000 images, you can use it. If you go over that, you have to repurchase that rights. So be sure to check the license agreements for each image that you decide you want to use. And I see Sam nodding his head. Would you like to add something, Sam?
No, just Ginger. Yeah, that's something that I use 123RF, which is 123royaltyfree.com, and that's one of the things that I really had to start focusing on, particularly with the internet. It's gotten a lot trickier. So what I found is there were some images. If I thought that, for example, on a cover, or if I thought that there were going to be more than 1,000 impressions, it changes the fee. In other words, it goes from being free to now being paid. And so you have to be very careful about that. And just a quick anecdote, not for a writing project, but we actually, this is kind of a cautionary tale for you using people that are young and inexperienced. We had a website that was being created for a nonprofit organization. They thought they were grabbing free images. In fact, they were not. And we ended up getting sued by the photographer who was in Australia, who had contracted with a company in the U.S. whose job is to track down images that are being used in an unauthorized or not paid. So we actually had to negotiate with them. Fortunately, they took pity on us, and it wasn't a terrible thing, but we're talking potentially thousands of dollars. And once you see, the key is it's not just that you go over the amount of images that are being used. Once you have broken that license agreement, it's a criminal act, and you're open to civil litigation. So now you're getting into penalties. So it's not just, it would have been, what they're trying to do is get everybody to actually pay for those. And then you don't have to worry about the $1,000 in penalties that you would get in a civil suit. So paying attention to those details, really important. It's another reason why another reason you might want to go with a good publisher, because publisher, so that you've got this stuff, you're doing it on your own, you're absorbing all the liability. If you work with a hybrid publisher, they'll have different arrangements, and as Ginger will say, you just make sure you get the images and that you've actually done your due diligence. So in every one of the traditional publishing contracts I have, as the author, I am responsible for providing the images and that they have been clear with copyright. I think every contract I've signed in the last, every contract I think I've signed, I've done that. It's just most of the time I generate my own images. So it's not as big of an issue. It's just easier than trying to track it down. But anyway, just reinforcing what Ginger was saying, and Jane's nodding her head, and others. Yeah.
Bottom line is take your own pictures.
If you can, yeah, absolutely. Like this, interestingly enough, the picture that's in back of me was taken by a friend of mine off of a cell phone. It is a beautiful image. And it's very high quality. In fact, it could be used by any publisher. So the technology that's available to us now is much greater than it was even 2 years ago. So get your art hat on and see if, or get someone who can. So the other thing you do is get a friend of yours who actually does the art and would like the exposure. So if you have someone who's an artist who's really getting off the ground, you like their art, they could do your cover and they might strike a deal just to get the exposure of their art on the cover of a book. It's marketing for them. So lots of different ways you can sort of approach this. I'm a big fan of going for the original art.
Nancy Hellickson is asking a question that I don't know what it means, but maybe somebody in this group does. What is the address of Tiny Eye?
You were just talking about it's the reverse image. You can tell the source of the image.
Who was talking about that?
I think Ginger had the clue to what the URL was.
Yeah, Ginger had the URL she was talking about a minute ago. Where'd Ginger go?
I don't know.
We lost Ginger.
We lost Ginger. I'll find out for you, Nancy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, put it. It's tiny URL, right?
Tiny Eye.
Tiny Eye.
I just looked it up. Tiny.
Oh, here comes Ginger. Here she comes. She's coming back in. Here we go.
It's exactly as it sounds. It's tinyeyeye.com.
Ah.
Thank you, Jen.
You're welcome.
Okay, Jennifer.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's TIN, no Y. TINEYE.com. So like 10I. TIN 10 EYE.
Can we put it in the chat?
Absolutely.
That would help. Yes. Thank you.
TIN
EYE.
Okay. Here we go. It didn't go to everybody. Sorry about that. There we go. All right. Jennifer Jordan, can I use quotes from presidents in my book as long as I give them credit, since I have no idea who to contact to get permission? Okay. Can she use quotes from presidents?
I think that's a Ginger answer. She's a publisher, so she would. Did we lose her?
Well,
yeah, you lost me for a minute. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to say a president is a public figure. And so when they give speeches, there's an expectation that those quotes will in fact be in the public domain. So usually it's a good practice to cite it. So where did the quote come from? Obviously, which president and where did they actually say it? That would be helpful. But and Ginger may correct me, but I think as public figures, they do not have ownership over, they don't have a copyright. And it's certainly as an elected official, I don't think there would be an issue with that at all. I'm not even aware of litigation. I think if it's a sitting U.S. president, an elected official, it's in the public domain.
True.
And it depends, because I've actually seen fiction books that have used real life figures in the fiction books and created their own dialogue for whatever they've had to say. The fact it's fiction, you can say anything came out of their mouth.
Right.
Yeah, you can use it because it falls into that it's owned by the government and anything by the government. Same thing with the pictures. If you have any questions about things like that, the best thing to do is contact a literary agent. I personally use Ava, who spoke at our conference several times, Bardsby. So if you need her contact information, I'll be happy to share it with you.
Ava Doppelt, right?
Yeah, Dopplet. Sorry.
Oh, well, okay.
Doppelt.
Okay, we'll get it.
Doppelt. Doppelt.
Right. Well, guys, I think this was a very good first practical tips. I thank you for all coming. And in closing, I'd like to remind you again that our annual book awards deadline is April 30th. So go to myfapa.org and enter your fabulous book today. And thank you for all joining us in our first practical tips for authors. Next month, we will have Patty Jefferson and Chris Gibson discussing book marketing 2021. They will discuss marketing in person as opposed to online. So please register by going to my email again, Pat Stanford at myfapa.org, and put practical tips in the subject line. You don't have to get, if you're here today, you don't have to give me all that other stuff. Just say, I want to sign up again for add me to April or whatever. So that's all you need to do is type in add me for April. So I hope to have you back next month. Good night, everyone.
Good night, Pat.
Good night. Thank you all for coming, and see you at the conference in July.